Gear, rotations, talents, and runes aren't the whole story on Warrior. We also have broken abilities causing hundreds of damage, consumes, raid buffs, boss debuffs, and tricks that are important too. We'll cover deep wounds soon, but gear and talents come first. Here's the gear that matters. You don't have to raid to get any of these pieces, plus they are all easy to get. You'll never replace these two. They are best in slot. The ring, Silverlane's family seal, is from the third boss of Shadowfang Keep. And the belt, Cobran's Grasp, is from an early boss in Wailing Caverns. It drops near the entrance. You can buy boosts for either of these items. I think all the stealth classes can solo it, but you're definitely able to buy it. As for the other pieces, any shoulders with 5 strength or more works great. You don't need this brand in particular. Tiger with 6 strength and 5 agi is the best in the game, I believe, but that will be a lot of gold if it's available at all. Pattern bronze bracers are 5 strength, which is 3 less than our Abyss, but they're also hundreds of gold cheaper. These pants, the whatevers of Westfall, are the best before raid, and they're from a quest that everyone does, so just grab them while you're leveling up. These pieces, however, that's your long-term goal. A couple of them are from your pre-Abyss set, but not all of them. Let's run through the bosses really quick and see who drops what. Yeah, these are the first few. It's getting old. These are the last guys. Ooh, weapon time. But back to pre-raid weaponry. These will be our new stars. I really like these two. Smite's Hammer is very strong going into BFD, but most people will probably be better off using dual wield. It works better if you have limited buffs. It's easier to play. I'd probably go with this pair of weapons starting out, unless you really want a quick strike and use a two-hander, which is one of the 2 talent and rune builds you can go. If you wanted to roll with a two-hander, you'd need Raging Blow, Quick Strike, Consumed by Rage. Now, that last one, Consumed by Rage, allows Raging Blow to be cast, and we only have to give up a little bit of attack speed to get it. It's not a no-brainer, but the final 2 runes are. Raging Blow has no competition for its slot. There isn't any hidden rage generation tech here, although there is hidden damage tech, and our final rune will be Quick Strike. It doesn't hit too hard itself, but once you factor in the Wind Fury procs it can cause, this is an insanely efficient DPS ability. It hits for about your AP divided by 5. It wouldn't be a good move if it didn't proc Wind Fury, but it does. So it's similar to a Heroic Strike that is twice as efficient. If it reset your swing timer, then this ability would be trash. It would just be an instant cast version of Slam in that case, and no one would take it. If using Quick Strike sounds like a pain, Dual Wield might be for you. Dual Wield or Single-Minded Fury spec increases all of your damage, not just auto attacks. The other runes, which give you more rage, may be tempting, but 10% ability damage and auto attack damage is too much to give up. Consumed by Rage is the only rune that can help us when we're using one-handers, so we don't really have a decision there. The attack speed's only for two-handed weapons, and we can already use Thunderclap in battle stance if we wanted to. Flagellation or Raging Blow can be chosen for our first and final rune. What's best is going to depend on your kill times, but I'd probably go with Raging Blow. Raging Blow is your hardest hitting instant cast ability, and it feels really good to use. But it does change your rotation a bit. You need to be enraged to use Raging Blow, which is just another reason the pull is super important for warriors. You want to have high uptime on your buffs and get to spend a lot of rage. On pull, have a bit less than 80 rage and then blood rage right as you get to the boss. This will put you over 80 and activate Consumed by Rage. It's also going to enable you to use Raging Blow, but you'd be able to do that either way because blood rage enables it too. Make sure you pool some rage before the bosses, because if you have to grind up to 80, it's going to be impossible to parse on the boss. Now, having more than 80 can also be a problem, because you'll only activate your enrage when you move over the threshold. Simply being above 80 rage will not activate your buff all on its own. So once you have the teamwork part figured out and you can get a nice pull setup, here is your rotation. It's pretty fun, and it's the same for all the warrior DPS specs. You just swap Hamstring out for Quick Strike if you're going one-handers. Anyways, Raging Blow on CD. Overpower right away when it's up, even if you're over Rage Cap. Quick Strike or Hamstring when over 80 Rage. Throw in Heroic Strikes too if you need to dump some excess. Remember, the goal here is to be constantly tripping over 80 Rage and getting our damage bonus, but we also want to avoid going over 100 and wasting any. The engine here for our DPS is getting Wind Fury procs that generate rage that we spend on more Quick Strikes, while keeping that sweet enrage effect activated at all times. And yes, we still use Execute, but it's a pain now. Make sure it won't cost you uptime on your enrage effects. Use it on the final seconds of a boss fight, or maybe you can use it if you have a rage pot and blood rage ready so you can get back to 80 quickly. Same deal for any other DPS specs. Be careful not to mess up this Execute timing. Execute only does 3 damage per rage over 15, which is the lowest damage per rage ability in your arsenal. Execute is used because of the flat damage portion. At max level, it's like 50 damage per rage, but at 25, it's like 12 because it's 125 damage. And Execute at 100 rage without enrage up is going to do less damage than literally any other way you could have spent 100 rage. Even just the flat damage on Heroic Strike outclasses it. But now, you have to make a decision. Pick Quick Strikes or Single-Minded Fury. No other choices will be made. Both will use these talents. If you hate using Overpower, you could move the points into Cruelty. It's not optimal, but it's whatever. As for your other talents, we go into the Arms tree. Primarily for Deep Wounds. We have the Wrath version of Deep Wounds. I'll explain what that means later, but basically you get the full 60% damage bonus every time. It doesn't get wasted. Impale is weak right now, so we're not putting any points in it because we have low crit. Also, it increases the bonus damage of a crit from 200% to 220%. So it doesn't make you hit for 20% more. It's actually a 10% increase in damage. This is some math to show how much it would change the DPS in these logs. Anyways, it's weaker than Cruelty. This talent's also worse than Cruelty because the crit from talents is such a large portion of our total crit right now. Losing 1% crit here would be similar to losing 10% of our Deep Wounds. Actually, it would be exactly that, so it's very important that we have some crit at this moment. But, of course, we have higher stats in Raid. These are the consumes you take. Rumsey gives a little health. Sadly, all the food items give a little health too. You could ignore these and just go for the damage consumes. The 2 potions are H Strength and Agility. 8 Agility is nearly 1% crit at level 25, and 8 Strength is going to increase your weapon DPS by 1. This isn't affected by your level at all. If you are insane, you could pay extra and use a scroll instead of these elixirs. You'd get an additional stat point, but it's pretty expensive. And on Horde, if you're absolutely nuts, you can go and get these 2 effects. They don't last very long, but they'll give you an extra 2 Strength and Agi. It's a total pain. You'll need to get summoned to the raid. It's up to you. Make sure to bring boons and have your world buffs. Weapon Stone is our final stat bonus besides that, but you're probably not going to use it. If you have a 2-hander, you can't use it at all. If you have 1-handers, you can only use it on your offhand. If you put it on your main hand, Wild Strikes will not work, just like Wind Fury weapon. This has definitely gotten thousands of Alliance warriors. Gotta learn how effects work, guys. If you have a lot of attention, engineering can also be a nice way to add a little bit of extra damage with consumes, but it isn't a requirement. And you get no style points for attempting to use engineering and then having it reduce your DPS by doing less of your actual abilities. And our final consumes are combat potions. Rage Potion is great, take them. You can use it to execute, get enraged on pull, maybe as a backup when you hit your buttons wrong. You also want to bring Free Action Potion. It's awesome. It's basically just for Kel risk, but it's going to make you immune to chains. Also consider Shadow Protection Pots. There are a few places those can help out. As for the raid buffs, there are a few must-have classes if you want to parse. Hunter, Locke, Feral Druid, Priest, and Paladin on Alliance. You'll get these buffs from them. Hunters, basically kings. Most Pallies won't have that talent. Locks are for the debuff. Priest is for homunculi, but hey, this is insane. You absolutely need a priest. This guy applies all 3 of the warrior debuffs instantly and at max stacks. If you don't have this, you're going to be stuck in Sunder Jail, and you will not parse. As for paladins, they have might, and ferals have a lot. Wind Fury, Mangle, stats from Mark, wow. And eventually they'll have Fairy Fire, but not yet. Speaking of Mangle, now let's get into how Deep Wounds is broken or working. Every time you crit, you store damage in Deep Wounds. Deep Wounds then divides the damage stored by 4. This happens right after you crit and evenly ticks it out over the next 12 seconds. Here's an example. If 60% of your weapon damage was equal to 60, then if you crit, you would store 60 damage on the Deep Wounds. Dividing that by 4, it means that the Deep Wounds would tick for 15 at a time. Let's say I get another crit right after the first tick. So that means I have 45 stored from the previous Deep Wounds. Now I need to add an extra 60 because I just crit again. This would be equal to 105 damage. When I divide that by 4, I get 26 damage every 3 seconds. Fun fact, Enrage activates twice on this ability, so it will make it so the base damage was higher, so the Deep Wounds tick for more, but the whole time the Enrage is still on yourself, this 26 would get an additional effect on it. So it actually wouldn't tick for 26, it would tick for like 30. Pretty nice. Anyways, back to the buffs. You may be wondering how much these buffs matter, all the effects you get from everyone. Well, here's a little bit of information so you can decide for yourself. Every 14 AP you get is going to increase your weapon's DPS stat by 1. Keep that in mind. And as for armor debuffs, we can find the value of that by checking out the armor formula. This lets us know how much mitigation we have from an amount of armor. We can adjust this equation for a level 25 because that's what our level is, and we are attacking the boss. The boss is not attacking us. As you can see, the value of armor decreases as you get more of it, but it stays kind of constant. At nearly 0 armor, the value is high. Here's a math class moment. Take the derivative and plug in 0 to find the value of 1 armor. Now multiply it by 140 because that's how much Cursive Wreck removes. Great, and now we have solved how much this debuff is worth, and that is 5.5% of your DPS. By the way, if you want to calculate how much your armor helps, you'd use 27 because that's the level of the bosses. Current bosses are only 2 levels above us, so that's another reason your weapon skill doesn't matter. If you want to learn more about that, though, you're going to have to check out Meiji's guide. Here's an organized loot list for all the gear you want this phase.